Alright, we're working on a 2004 Honda Element here. We have a squeak coming out of the wheel bearing. I changed the wheel bearings a few years ago and kind of used the cheap O'Reilly's brand. Kind of regret that now because this isn't a real easy job on this, but we also have a CV boot that's been broke about 6 months or so. And I was going to change it after the winter. Now that summer's almost here, it's a good time to change it. So I'm just going to show how to change the axle. I got other videos on how to change the wheel bearing on these. Not on these, but on CRVs and stuff like that. So it's pretty much the same from like a CRV or something. So we're going to, first thing we're going to do, so I'm going to do a few steps extra here that you probably won't have to do if you do just the axle. Like I'm going to take the rotor off and stuff like that. But I'll let you know. I'll just skip over that when I'm recording here and just focus on the axle. So I'm going to go ahead and take this caliper off and the line right here, which I think is 12 also. Yeah, it is. So what we're going to do, what I'm going to do is go ahead and pull this caliper off, which you would have to do if you were changing the axle, and just the axle, because alright, got someone calling me. I'll pick it right back up in a second. Alright, so once you get those two 12mm bolts out, just go ahead and remove your caliper and set it off to the side. Now mine's got a lot of grease on it from that CV axle. I'm just going to hang it right here on top of the strut. Now if you were just going to change the axle, you would have to remove this caliper bracket or rotor, but I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick because I'm going to change the wheel bearing too, like I said before. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this real quick and then I'll pick it back up. Alright, before I loosen the strut, I'm going to go ahead and take this 36mm nut off for the axle. That's 36mm. If you don't have the axle nut, you can probably rent it or buy it at the auto parts store. Now we got these two here that we have to take off to the strut, and then that should be all we have to take off to get the axle out, slide it out. And I believe this might be, nope. Alright, they're 19. For some reason I thought they were 18. Honda likes to use, yeah, they're 19. So we got two 19mm bolts we got to take out here. And your steering knuckle should pull forward enough. Holy cow, those are tight. Alright, we got some spinners in the back. Get the open end real quick and I'll come right back. Alright, so you got a 22mm nut on the back side of these. Get something to hold it. And you're going to kind of want to look down here at your axle and make sure that it's slide forward. This one will. Sometimes they'll kind of be seized in there or rusted in there. And you can use like a hub puller or an axle pusher, or kind of beat it in if you're not going to reuse the axle, which we're obviously not. This one's pretty tore up. So now we're going to pull this out. Now this should be enough to get the axle out of this, like that. So now if you're doing just the axle, we're going to go under it, and you can see here my boot's ripped. It's been ripped about 6 months. I went ahead and drove it through the winter like that with the plans of changing it in the spring or summer. I wasn't going to worry about it in the winter. Figured the worst. It wasn't clicking yet or anything, so it's actually still not making any noise, but it's pretty dried out. It's shot rubber, grease everywhere. But I am going to take this stupid wheel. Yeah, it don't sound too good. Huh. So that wheel bearing lasted only about maybe 2 years. It's already bad. So I'm going to get underneath it. We'll get a pickle fork and a hammer, and we'll take this axle out, and I'll show you how to do that. And then I'll get the parts and put it back in, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and pull this off. Now you want to pull your lower ball joint out. I'm going to do that on this one because, like I said, I'm going to replace the wheel bearing, so I'm going to have to take this whole thing and put it in the hub or into the press. But I'm not going to show that. I have 3 or 4 other videos showing how to press in wheel bearings on these style. These are the press in and out, so we're not going to show that, and I've already said it. But if you're just doing the axle, take off your caliper, these 2 bolts, your axle nut. This will pull forward enough to get this out. And then we'll go under there with the pickle fork and a small hammer and knock the axle out, and then we'll put it back together. So I'm going to deal with this stuff, and then I'll be right back. Alright, so this wasn't really easy to get out. Usually they pop right out, and usually what I do, you don't want to pry on this part. This is your bearing, your carrier bearing. This is all cast aluminum, so if you pry on this, there's a good chance you'll break it. So I never pry on this. Don't put you know, a pickle fork between here and try to pry it out. What I did, I actually hit it a bunch of times with the pickle fork and could not get it to budge. And then I got this long punch type thing, chisel, and was able to swing on it hard enough to finally get it out and separate it. These do, not as bad as the Toyota, but these Hondas sometimes do seize into this intermediate shaft or jack shaft pretty badly sometimes. So anyway, and you can see here, or hopefully you can see here, there's some pretty good gouges in it from me just beating the crap out of it. So it's out now, and good thing about the passenger side, you don't have to worry about losing fluid or anything, because you got this other shaft that goes in the transmission, intermediate shaft, and it doesn't come out. You don't have to worry about taking this out. So we're just taking this piece out, the half shaft. So anyway, that's how I got it out, using the long chisel type tool and really swinging on it hard. Definitely was seized in there pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and slide the new one up in here, and we're going to lock it in, and then we'll just tap it back in, start putting it back together. So I got the new one just kind of slid and kind of halfway locked into place right here, and then we'll just go out and gently tap on it until it seats back in. You just want to make sure the splines are all lined up and locked in before you start beating on it, because if you do, if they're not lined up, you could damage them, and then you're going to have to replace the shaft. And I don't think they make it aftermarket, so you're talking Honda or junkyard. It'd be pretty expensive. So anyway, just make sure that it's locked in, and you can kind of turn them both together at the same time, and then you're ready to start hammering it back in. Alright, so you're just going to kind of line it up, make sure it's locked up like I said before, and then we're just going to tap it in. And you kind of hear that different sound, and that means it's all the way seated. So this is all the way seated. And like I said before, I went ahead and changed the ball joint and wheel bearing on this. So my steering knuckle's out of the way, but you can still do what I just did with yours still attached. And I'm just going to go ahead and put mine back on real quick and get this axle started up. It's going to be a little bit harder with a new axle. It's not as compliant, but you can see there, went in. And I put a little bit of grease on the hub there, so that's all that is. And I'm going to put one bolt through the top here. I still have to tighten my lower ball joint, which you won't have to do. Because you're not doing a ball joint probably. So we're just going to start these 2 bolts back up here, and you'll be on the home stretch with yours. All you'll have left after that, these 2 bolts will be probably putting your brake caliper back on and torquing down your axle. And I'll give you the torque specs at the end of the video. So if you're interested in that, just wait till the end of the video, and I'll put that information up. So let me get the tools I need. Make sure your axle's all the way through your hub here. And on the Hondas, after you torque it, there's a little indentation in the axle here, and you take a punch and you just put it right here on the end of this lip here on the nut and beat down on it, and that kind of pins the nut where it's at on the torque. So I'm going to go ahead and get my tools real quick, and then we'll pick it right back up. Alright, you got your 19 and your 22. Go ahead and torque those down real quick. And we're going to go ahead and put the brake rotor back on, and put the brakes back on, then you're ready to go, other than torquing your axle nut. So at this point, you just put your caliper back on. I'm going to go ahead and put the rotor on real quick, and then we'll go over it. Alright, so we're just putting the caliper bracket back on real quick. I guess it's not where, I guess I am. I don't know why I would say that. So all we have left at this point, besides torquing the bolt down to the proper spec, is your axle nut, is your caliper. We're just going to go ahead and hang that. And you're going to put your two 12mm bolts back in, and then you're going to, if you took your hose off, which you probably did, you're going to put that 12mm bolt back in, torque down your axle, and you're good to go. So I'll leave the specs for the axle at the end here, and then it should be it. It's pretty straightforward. It's these do seize up on the passenger side, unfortunately. Sometimes you got to hit them pretty good and find the right tool combination to hit them, so that you're getting a good angle at it and getting a good enough hit on them. But they're not quite as bad as some of the Toyotas where you got to cut them out. So anyway, I guess that's it for a passenger side axle on a 2004 Honda Element, but it's the same pretty much for all the Elements and the CRVs. So thanks for watching, and as always, God bless.